Good morning and welcome to Today in Putnam County, hosted by Putnam County Mayor Randy Porter, the show that takes a look at the events and what's happening all around Putnam County, as well as interviews with local, community, and business leaders. And now, sharing his insights and experience, here's Today in Putnam County with County Mayor Randy Porter.
Thanks, Philip Gibbons. Good morning. Thanks for joining us this week. Hope you're having a great weekend. Our show this week is about the Andy Griffin of Putnam County. And if anybody knows what I'm talking about, and I'm sure there's some of you do, that's none other. Hey, he's pretty good at it.
Pretty good at that.
It's Mr. Danny Holmes. Danny's our guest today, and his new boss is also with us, Mr. Bill Gibson, Power of Putnam. Danny, you remember the old TV show, This Is Your Life?
I do.
Well, this is your life, Danny Holmes. Glad to have you all on the show. I wanted to talk about Danny and your career in law enforcement, and then talk about your new job in Power of Putnam. And Bill, of course, you've been involved with Power of Putnam almost since its existence, haven't you?
I have been since the day one in 2003 in one way or another.
Wow, it's hard to believe. It's been 21 years. That's a great program. We're going to go all the way back in Danny's when, what do we used to call them, Danny Dare officers?
We did, long time ago.
So let's start out. You got a long career in law enforcement. I go back to years and years and years when you first started, I guess with Jerry Abston. Was that your first job?
Yes.
So kind of start there and tell us what made you want to get into law enforcement, and then let's walk up through your career.
Well, thank you, Mayor. Glad to be on the program today. And, my career started basically right out of high school. I joined the United States Marine Corps just right afterwards because I had no idea what I wanted to do. And my brother had been on the Cookeville Police Department since 1969, and I was in the cadet program under Chief Bill Blue.
Bill Blue.
Now, that goes way back.
He was probably one of the most popular police chiefs and sheriffs that's probably, and then Jerry Abston after that, right. But Bill Blue was really popular.
Well, Chief Blue was definitely a mentor, and he was, to me, Mr. Law Enforcement.
Yeah.
He really was. But so we go back to probably, 1968, 69, and I was a cadet, and cadets they got to ride with the police, and I had a chance to ride with my brother, and then he joined the Highway Patrol in 1973.
Yeah.
You remember that?
Yeah.
So when I came out of the Marine Corps, I went to Carthage for a very, very short time. It was so funny. My mother, God bless her, she would call Jerry Abston on a weekly basis.
Wanting him to hire you?
Yeah. Will you hire my son, Danny Holmes? He don't need to work in Carthage. He needs to come to Putnam County. I'm not kidding you. And she'd see him out on the streets. Well, Jerry, what are we going to do about Danny Holmes? And so finally I got the phone call, and I was 21 years old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, 21 years old, 1976. And went to work, and it was kind of an experience like no other because there were 6 deputy. Can you imagine that?
I was thinking back in the day. You had no backup on if you worked nights. You had none. You were there by yourself, right?
And you remember Freddie Maynard?
Yes.
He was the only midnight deputy, and we only got one day off a week.
Yeah.
One day.
Back then, you didn't get paid overtime.
Oh no, overtime.
Government employees didn't get overtime, and so and Bill, you remember that?
I
City
do.
Police. I mean, we worked. You could work 80 hours a week.
Jerry Abston didn't even know what overtime was. I'll just tell you. And this is a funny story. So he told me to be at work at 8 a.m. I come in at 8 a.m. The old jail.
Old jail,
you remember
yeah.
that? So at 4 o'clock, I'm walking up the sidewalk, and he just happens to come out, and he goes, "Hey, Holmes, where are you going?" "I'm going home." "Oh, no, you don't get off till midnight." And I went, 8 a.m. till midnight? He said, "Yes, that is correct." And I thought, oh, what mistake.
What have I got myself
into?
He left that detail out.
Yeah. So I turned around, went back, and but you know what? It was a close-knit family.
Yeah.
You remember Morris Cronk.
Yeah.
He was my mentor, one of them. And you remember Jimmy Whitaker. We called him Knothead. You remember that?
Yes, I remember all of them.
All of them. And we just had a great group. Donnie Duncan.
Yeah.
So I really didn't know what I was getting into. And so we'd go on these domestic calls and things like that. And, of course, Morris was he's a big guy.
He was.
And if he told you to do something,
you better do it.
You better do
Yeah.
it. So, but there was an instance, and I'll tell this story real quick. We were on the porch of this lady, kind of a large lady, and we were probably 10 foot off the ground. And I told her she was under arrest. She said, "I'm not under arrest." I said, "Yes, ma'am. You're going to have to go to jail." Well, she picked me up. True story. Threw me off the porch. I thought it killed me. I really did. I thought I was dead. I was laying there on my back, and Morris grabbed
He's
hold.
dying laughing.
Yeah, he just grabbed hold of her, and we got her to the car. But I really thought that was it. And then you remember Leon Mansfield?
Leon Mansfield, yeah, bless
was
his
just
heart.
a great
was.
police officer. I mean, these were genuine police officers back
Danny, those guys and you yourself, y'all were dedicated to the citizens of the county. I'm not saying that ours aren't today. We have some great law enforcement, okay? But you were dedicating your lives knowing that you were going to be out on calls, and for somebody to come as your backup, either the city was going to have to respond out in the county to you, or THP might come to you, or one of the deputies going to get up from home and come to you. I mean, you were putting your life on the line.
That really
back
happened
then.
a lot. We were on call, and of course, there were no cell phones. You remember that?
Oh, yeah.
I never will forget. It was midnight, and thank God I was getting ready to go home, and the sheriff said, "I need you to go with me." I said, "Oh, come on, Sheriff, where are we going?" He said, "Well, we're going up to the Putnam-Fentress County line." And I said, "What's going on?" He said, "Someone had been run over." It was cold that night.
Yeah.
And, of course, what am I going to do? I'm going to get in the car with him. And we go up there, and this, bless his heart, he was drunk. He had been stumbling out in the road. He'd been ran over about 3 or 4 times. What a sight.
Yeah.
What a sight. And of course, sheriff says, "I need you to go to the next house and call for the coroner and get rescue up here." And but, I never will forget knocking on their door. There I stood at 1 o'clock in the morning, and wanting to use their telephone. But, a lot of instances like that.
Yeah.
Stuff that you just don't make it up.
No, and it's things have totally changed today in law enforcement. We're talking with Danny Holmes. I call him the Andy Griffin of Putnam County. Been in law enforcement just about all of his life from the age of 21. And also Bill Gibson with Power of Putnam, as Danny has changed jobs out of law enforcement back into kind of where you first started. So you were at the Sheriff's Department. Tell me how the DARE program started. You were one of the first DARE officers,
Yes.
I remember. How did that start?
Well, of course, DARE started in 1986.
Okay.
Roy Cravens was the very first
That's right.
DARE officer. He worked with the Cookville Police Department. And so I come in one day, and there sits Senator Tommy Burks, and as we all know, he was the father of the DARE program.
He created the bill that created it.
He sure did. So I walk in, sheriff calls me in his office, and of course I knew Tommy, and I said, "Hi, Senator, how you doing?" And sheriff said, "Take a seat." I thought, uh-oh, here we go
I'm
again.
in trouble.
Yeah, here we go again. And he said, "You're going to be our first DARE officer." And I go, "Okay, what is that?" I had no idea.
Nobody knew.
Nobody knew.
Yeah.
And, of course, Senator Burks kind of, told me what it was about, and teaching kids to stay off drugs,
Right.
and, to keep kids off drugs. And so I had to go to school for a couple weeks and learn the activities, and had some great – actually, the Tennessee Highway Patrol put that program on down in Murfreesboro. So I come back and started teaching in Baxter, Monterey, and Allgood, and it was a great program. You'll remember that.
Oh, yeah.
And Sheriff Abson would buy their T-shirts, DARE to keep kids on. And boy, when we passed those out, it was just like you was giving them a gold medal.
Yeah, things were different back then.
A lot different back then. Then we had a ceremony. We had DARE essay contests where, someone would win the contest, and it was so funny. We had what we called a little DARE bear. You
remember
that?
those,
Sure.
yeah.
Well, Senator Burks' granddaughters, of course, everybody thinks that I just gave it to them, but I didn't, because they wrote an excellent essay. Why wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Their grandfather's the father of DARE.
Yeah.
And so I talked to Amy New, over at the chamber, and she said, "Danny, I still have my DARE
Still
bear."
got that DARE bear. That was a great time back then. And, hey, we got to take a break. This is the life of Danny Holmes as our radio show this week. Talking about Danny's career, but we're also going to get into his new job with Power of Putnam. But we want to catch more with Danny and bring him up to today, and we're going to do that. Stay with us.
And now back to Today in Putnam County, hosted by Putnam County Mayor Randy Porter.
Welcome back to Today in Putnam County. I'm your host, County Mayor Randy Porter. Hope you're having a great weekend. Our show this week is about the Andy Griffins of Putnam County, is what I call it. It's Mr. Danny Holmes. If you know Danny, he's had a great career in law enforcement all the way back into the 80s. He was one of our first DARE officers here in Putnam County that taught our kids to not use drugs. And we're bringing up Danny's life from back then of being the DARE officer, and we're going to continue with that. Also got Mr. Bill Gibson, who is with Power of Putnam, and he's Danny's new boss now, for good or bad, Bill.
I'm going to go ahead and say it's for good.
Okay, but we got a lot of stuff to talk about with Power of Putnam also. So, Danny, we got you up. You're the DARE officer. You're going into schools. Tell about that, because I remember it's like when you came into the schools, all the classes stopped, right? And everybody comes to the DARE program.
And let me tell you, it was just a great program. So, the DARE program was like 12 programs. So 12 weeks is basically what it was, and for an hour a day per class. So when I would go in, it was amazing. The teachers, they go, well, here comes Deputy Dan, or, here comes Sergeant Holmes, and just kids.
Lieutenant Dan.
Yeah, that was the last one, was Lieutenant Dan. And I never will forget this one kid from All Good, bless his heart. He go, here comes Lieutenant Dan. And,
But the kids loved you.
They did. Oh, it was great. And so you go through 12 weeks of DARE, and then at the end, you had a ceremony, a graduation, and it was huge. It was huge. All the parents and the teachers and the students would come up. Tommy Burks was, if he could make it, he made every single DARE graduation. He would always be our guest speaker. But what's funny is even days that wasn't DARE, if I had time to go by the school,
you were there.
They would stop work.
Yeah.
We'd go outside. We'd play kickball, softball. Just amazing program.
Have you ever thought, Danny, of how many kids' lives you touched in that 10-year span or whatever that you were the DARE? I mean, I think about that, and a whole generation there of kids that you touched that didn't use drugs or didn't use alcohol because of you and what you meant to that. I mean, that's got to really feel good, doesn't it?
It's a great feeling. Even to this day, I'll have adults come up and say, do you remember me? I'm like, some of them I would.
Yeah.
It's just amazing how many you would know.
And thousands of kids, Danny, in your career
That's
that
true.
you touched.
That's true. And now they're in their 40s.
And got kids.
And they would introduce me to their kids and say, this was my DARE officer. And, of course, these kids don't even know what DARE is today.
They don't.
It's sad that the program did go away, and it needed a revamping. We all know that. It was based back in the 1980s, and it never really got caught up to modern day. But these kids loved it. They had books that we would go through. And again, we had DARE essays that they would write why that they would commit themselves to stay off of drugs.
And that was a great program. Fast forward, Police Chief of Baxter. What made you want to become a police chief? I mean, you're in law enforcement still, but then all of a sudden you're the boss.
Well, that's true. I stayed a little over 30 years with the Putnam County Sheriff's Department, and I retired in 2006. So from 76 to 2006, 30 years.
30 years, yeah. That's a career.
It was a career. So I retired, and I was only 51 years old, if you'll remember that.
Yeah.
And so I told my wife, Mary, I said, this isn't for me. Retirement is not for me.
Not at that young age.
I'm too young. And so I went to work at the hospital for a little bit.
That's right.
For
hospital security.
Hospital security. And I worked there for 4 years. And then Baxter needed a police chief. And the council, they showed up on my doorstep. They were calling me and said, we want you to be the police chief. And, I thought about it. I said, no. I said, I really don't want to get back into law enforcement. I've done 30 years.
Yeah.
You've seen it all.
Yeah.
And so finally I told my wife, I said, I'm going to take that job. So we interviewed for it. We went before the city council and got voted in unanimously and stayed there 13 more years.
Wow. So 43 years in law enforcement, now got a new job with somebody that dedicated his life to law enforcement. Bill, you were city police. I mean, you brought me pizzas when I was a 911 dispatcher back in probably 79, 80, right around in there. And so now you got Andy Griffin working for you at Power of Putnam. How is that?
I was just sitting here reminiscing when Danny was talking about all those iconic officers and deputies that he worked with. And I actually started at the police department in 1977.
You were 2 years before me, and Danny was 3 years before me.
So I started a year after Danny did on kind of a parallel track, different agency, but we see each other a lot and got to know each other over the years. And actually, I'm not sure what year it was, but I got to watch he and Miss Mary's early connections being made.
Yeah, I remember that.
Back when they were just kids.
Yeah, I remember that too, when they first started dating.
I do too.
That's another story.
He outkicked his coverage on that one.
He did. That's a love story that's run on for a long time too, and just improved as time's gone on. But we've been good friends for a long time, and Danny's been involved with Power of Putnam for about the past 14 years on our board, and is a constant volunteer for things. And of course, Power of Putnam runs off of volunteers. We depend on a lot of volunteer participation, and he was just always there when we needed him and never really said no. And when this situation came up where he was needing a job, I kind of got in ahead of it a little bit and started talking to him about, like, if it plays out where he becomes available, that we'd sure like to have first dibs on hiring him. And that's based on his connections that he can make with youth mayors. He's
got a gift, doesn't he, Bill?
He's got a gift.
Yeah.
And Power of Putnam focuses so much energy, substance abuse prevention energy on the youth. Yeah. And it's so much easier to, nip it in the bud, to go back to your Andy Griffin thing, to stop that before it starts. And Danny just seemed like the perfect person, because I actually attended a whole lot of his DARE graduations and saw that interaction firsthand.
Don't you always think, Danny, that God gave you a gift to, not everybody can reach out to the youth like you've been able to in your lifetime. You just always had that gift or that knack to where the kids loved you and they looked up to you, and you've always done a great job, I think, during your whole career. You didn't have anything bad. I mean, you and Mary raised a family. You got a great son, local hometown boy. I mean, they always looked up to you because you'd made it a point to always try to do what's right. And I just think of the lives that you've touched. And now, back with Power of Putnam, almost a full around the clock, back to being with the kids again. But it's different now, though, isn't it?
It's a lot different now than it was back then. And I'm so thankful. It's like Bill told you, we've been friends for 50 years. Started our law enforcement career, and then he became the attorney general. And I'd always invite him to the DARE graduations, and he was like Senator Burks if he was available. They showed a picture of us the other day, and I guess it was back in the 80s. It was so funny. They said, "Boy, you two sure did look different back then." I said, "Well, yeah, I had a little hair, and but it's just been great. He's been a great friend, and this is just a great opportunity for me. And I love talking to kids.
Yeah,
that.
You do.
It's just everybody says, "Well, you got that gift of gab," and I do.
You do.
And matter of fact, when I leave here, I'm on my way to Cornerstone School. They are having a field day, and they've invited me down, and that's where I will be when I leave the program today.
Well,
but we just love it. We love it. But things are different now, and you talk about opioids, which I'm the prevention officer, and it's just sad because these are painkillers. And anybody can get hooked on them. We all know that. It doesn't have to be the homeless guy out here, or it can be a doctor, it can be a lawyer, it can be a police officer. And I think about that all the time. And then you talk about fentanyl, and it's kind of funny, Mayor, because about 3 weeks ago, Mary had her gallbladder taken out. And so the nurse said, well, I'm going to give you fentanyl. And she, whoa, no. She said, I can't take fentanyl. And she said, now, wait a minute. There's a little bit different than this fentanyl. You know, and so it was so funny, the look on her face.
Well, you had her already. I mean, everybody's brainwashed with no fentanyl, and it's been used in the medical field for years and years and years and years.
Well, sure.
And it's a safe drug if it's used properly, but this that's coming across the border is bad stuff. And I want us to talk about that in the next segment. We got to take a break. Listen to Today in Putnam County. My guest today, Mr. Danny Holmes and Mr. Bill Gibson with Power of Putnam. Stay with us.
And now back to Today in Putnam County, hosted by Putnam County Mayor Randy Porter.
Welcome back to Today in Putnam County, and thanks, Philip Gibbons. Hope you're having a great weekend. Our show this week, it's about one of our longtime law enforcement professionals. I call him the Andy Griffith of Putnam County, Mr. Danny Holmes, and Mr. Bill Gibson, who is over Power of Putnam. And Danny now, after serving many years in law enforcement, is now back with Power of Putnam. Danny has a gift. He was our first DARE officer. Back then, that's what we called it, of teaching our youth not to be on drugs. Danny now is back with Power of Putnam. He's the youth opioid prevention officer. Bill, talk a little bit about Danny's job as of now. We talk about him. We put SROs in every school to help to make sure that we keep our kids safe. And y'all are working in the schools to try to keep them off on drugs and everything. How's Danny going to play a part in all that?
So it is that gift you spoke of, Mayor, that Danny has with connecting with young people. And Power of Putnam, as I said earlier, works really hard to get out ahead of substance use with young people. But there are some that are starting to show signs of trouble, early signs of use, and maybe at greater risk for falling into addiction. And that kind of manifests itself. Sometimes they get caught with things at school.
Yeah.
And we have an intervention program that we do that the kids and their parents or guardians can come to learn. It's all, we try to keep it all positive and keep it educational, but, help everybody understand the risks. And with the juvenile court, Judge Randolph sends some kids over to do their community service work with Power of Putnam. And when they do that, when they come over, we really try to just love on them and give them a lot of information while they're there, which we think is effective. And he selects kids that, are dabbling in substance misuse issues. And so it was a perfect fit for Danny Holmes. The timing couldn't have been better.
It's almost meant to be, wasn't it?
It was like a godsend.
Yeah.
And like you said, we're living in an age of fentanyl, and there's a lot of pills out there now that are counterfeit. Yeah. And there's a lot of those in Putnam County right now, where if somebody ends up taking one or breaking one in half and taking half of it, it quite often is a fatal overdose in one pill. So it's never been more important to get the kids not to start experimenting with it or doing anything with these things that can kill a good kid in just one incident.
Yeah, and things have changed, Danny. Back in your early career, was it marijuana?
Marijuana and alcohol.
Yeah.
That's all we talked about.
Yeah.
We never talked about anything else.
And I don't think we could have dreamed that it would turn into what it is today. And these kids, you get these fake pills, and what they think is ecstasy or Xanax or something that may not be really, that's not going to kill them, but it's laced with fentanyl. And then we wind up having all these overdoses, and we're losing our youth. And so that's your primary thing, right?
That's
to try
exactly
to save them?
Right. And most people here in Putnam County knows about the truck there in Texas that was bringing it back to Putnam County.
A truckload of it.
Truckload, and they were going to lace it with fentanyl.
It was enough to just kill a lot of people around here.
It was.
It's just totally different. Danny, I'm sure this has got to help. Got an SRO in every one of the schools. You know every one of them, so you're kind of going to be the liaison now, working with those guys?
That's exactly right. I was a strong supporter of an SRO in every school. As you know, that as a county commissioner, we didn't have enough to go in every school, and I spoke up and said, we didn't do it. None of the schools needs to be left out. You know that.
That's exactly right.
And if we can save our children, we don't know who's out there. We don't know what kind of weapons they have.
Nope.
And these SROs, I will have to say, Putnam County probably has one of the best SRO program in the state.
I agree.
There's no doubt about that. And they focus on training. When they're not in school, they're training. And, it's kind of neat to go by and see them outside checking doors to make sure that the doors are locked, because anybody can come in them open doors. We know that.
Yeah.
But it's a great thing to be the liaison between SROs, because, as you know, I know every one of them, and I'm looking forward to working with them. I'm going to do some training over the summer and then be ready to go when school starts back in August.
Bill, when you look at all Power of Putnam is doing, you got something new called Caught in the Act or something like that?
Well, we were talking about the school resource officers, and they're there to protect the kids, but they're also very interested in the kids' well-being. And one of those officers a few years ago came up with a positive thing. And of course, we don't want to just be negative. We don't want to just preach, don't use drugs and don't do this and don't do that. We want it to be positive, and we want to promote wellness and kindness and positive behaviors. And this thing is called Caught in the Act. And what he would do, he actually got a citation book, and we came up with some little incentives, some gift cards and things, pizzas and little things like that. And when he would catch a kid doing something kind or doing something nice,
good.
doing something good, he would write him a citation and take a mug shot. And the kid would be honored at school, and it was a way to take a negative and turn it into something positive, and it was a way to recognize those kids for doing good, and it became quite popular. And that's one thing that we're hoping that Danny can get started around in other schools too.
So, as we said earlier, Power of Putnam is based on donations and grants and volunteers. Do you allow folks in the community to get involved in Power of Putnam?
No, we live for folks in the community to get involved.
Tell them how they do that.
So check out our Facebook, Power of Putnam, or Instagram, or also our website, powerofputnam.org. And there's actually a link on there where you can put your email and your phone number and name in there, and we'll put you on our mailing list. Our coalition meets the first Thursday of every month at the Cookeville Police Department at 11, and we have a meal, and a lot of good people come together that share a common interest in reducing substance abuse and addiction here in Putnam County. And we are a community coalition, and it's good for anybody that wants to get involved with it.
Absolutely. Danny Holmes?
All walks of life are there with us. And Mayor, I appreciate you having me on. I feel very honored today, and it's just great to be with Mr. Gibson with the Power of Putnam, and our friendship has been many, many years.
Many years.
You were EMT and EMS.
We've had a great careers.
A great career.
And I will say thank you for your friendship, but also thank you for your service to our county. You have been a true godsend when it comes to our children and all that you've done with the DARE program and now Power of Putnam and everything. You've been a blessing, Danny, and I appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Hey, that's our show for this week. One event we got coming up, second annual Pop Power Touch-a-Truck event, is June 15th at 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. It's on Saturday before Father's Day at the Putnam County Fairgrounds. Great day. Bring your kids out. They can crawl on all these heavy machineries and emergency vehicles and helicopters and all kinds of things. It's a free event. It's at the Putnam County Fairgrounds on June the 15th. Bring your kids out. It'll be a great day. That's our show for this week. Hope you join us every weekend for Today in Putnam County. I'm County Mayor Randy Porter. Hope you have a great rest of your weekend, and may God continue to bless Putnam County.
You've been listening to Today in Putnam County, hosted by Putnam County Mayor Randy Porter.